gave them everything, so why do I feel like a stranger in their lives now? That's what Linda, 67, quietly whispered to me during a small gathering at our local senior center. She's a retired nurse, a widow, a mother of 2 grown children, both living in different states now. They still send flowers on her birthday. They still call every now and then. But the visits? They've become fewer with each passing year. Linda doesn't blame them. She understands. They have careers, families, full lives packed with deadlines and distractions, but still, deep down, something hurts. I tried to be honest with them, she said. I told them about my health, about the quiet nights, about what their father was really like. I thought it would bring us closer, but the more I shared, the further they seemed to drift. And maybe you felt that too. That invisible distance that grows, despite a heart that never stopped reaching out. A quiet, lingering question. Am I saying too much or just saying the wrong things? You love your children more than anything. But what if the way you express that love is quietly pushing them away? You miss them. You miss being needed. You miss the hugs, the laughter echoing through the kitchen. So you say it, gently, maybe even jokingly. Looks like it's just me in this quiet house again. You're not trying to make them feel bad. You're just being honest, right? But over time, even the softest honesty can start to feel heavy. And that's where our journey begins today. In this video, we'll explore 9 things parents often say to their adult children, out of love, that can unknowingly create guilt, distance, or quiet resentment. This isn't about staying silent. It's about choosing the right words at the right moments so love can land softly and stay. Because sometimes, the most loving thing you can say is nothing at all. You're not trying to make them feel bad. You're just being honest, right? But over time, even the gentlest honesty can become heavy. Linda, 67, a retired nurse and widow, lives in a quiet neighborhood. Her 2 daughters live far away, one in Denver, the other in Seattle. They call once a week, sometimes twice. But the house still echoes. So Linda starts saying what she feels. It's so quiet here at night. I leave the TV on just to feel like someone's here. I made too much soup again. I wish someone were here to eat it. I saw a couple holding hands today. It reminded me how lonely it is to sleep alone. She's not blaming them. She just wants to feel connected. But the more she shares, the shorter the calls become. And little by little, her daughters seem further away. Let me ask you something. Have you ever said things like that to your children? Ever said, I'm fine, but quietly hoped they'd ask again? And when you finally open up, do you ever feel worse, not better? Like you just pushed them a little farther away? If so, you are absolutely not alone. According to Dr. Jeanette Holmes, a geriatric psychologist who's worked with families for over 2 decades, repeated expressions of loneliness, no matter how subtle, can lead to something she calls empathy fatigue. She explains that adult children don't stop caring, but when they feel emotionally responsible for a sadness they can't fix, they begin to pull back. Not because they don't love you, but because they feel helpless. In other words, if your loneliness turns into their guilt, their instinct is to retreat, to protect themselves from something too heavy to hold. And here's the hard truth. Telling your children how lonely you are doesn't necessarily bring them closer. It often just makes them feel like they're never doing enough. But that doesn't mean you need to suffer in silence. It means you might need a different kind of conversation. Linda eventually spoke with a grief counselor. She didn't stop reaching out. She just changed how she did it. Instead of saying, it's so quiet here again, she sent a photo of her garden. Look what bloomed today. It made me think of you. Instead of saying, I ate alone again, she texted, tried that salmon recipe you gave me. I burned it a little, but hey, I'm improving. She joined a watercolor class, started walking with a small group on Tuesdays, volunteered once a week at the local library reading to children. Her loneliness didn't disappear overnight, but slowly her world began to fill again, not with silence, but with stories, people, color, and little joys. And then something else shifted. Her daughters started calling more, because now her voice carried warmth, not quiet sorrow. Joy invites connection. Guilt shuts it down. Dr. Laura Chin, a family therapist, says it beautifully. One of the greatest gifts parents can give their adult children is freedom from emotional guilt. When you begin to build joy for yourself, you give your children permission to stop worrying and start reconnecting. So if you're feeling lonely, start simple. Wake up and plan just one small thing each day. A walk, a phone call, a coffee with a neighbor, join a group in your town, A class, a library circle, a hiking meetup, anything that brings you back into motion. And when you think of your children, reach out with something light. Instead of saying, I miss you, try, I heard a song today that reminded me of our road trips. Because here's what's true. Your children want you to be happy, but they can't be your only source of happiness. When you fill your own world with life, even in the quiet seasons, you don't just protect your own heart, you protect the relationship. So let me ask you, what's one small thing that made you smile this week? A sunrise, a conversation, a memory. If something comes to mind, I'd love for you to share it. And if nothing comes yet, maybe today's a good day to go make one, because it's not your loneliness that pushes your children away. It's the weight of feeling like they're the only ones who can fix it. And that's not your fault, but it is something you can gently, powerfully change. Now, let's talk about something else, something just as subtle, but just as damaging. Speaking poorly of your spouse, even when you think your children are old enough not to be affected. Let's talk about why even a little venting might leave a long echo. And sometimes, what pushes our children away doesn't come from what we say about them. It comes from what we say about each other. Let's talk about this quietly, gently, because I know it's not easy. After decades of sharing a home, a life, and maybe even some hard disappointments with your spouse, you might find yourself carrying quiet resentments. You might feel unseen, unappreciated, maybe even hurt, and you have every right to those feelings. But here's where things get complicated. The person you share those thoughts with matters. When you speak negatively about your spouse, especially to your children, even as adults, it doesn't just vent your frustration, it reshapes their memory of home. Your child may be 40, 50, even 60 years old, but when they hear one parent say, I should have married someone else, or I wasted my best years, something inside them shifts. The foundation they believe was once solid now feels cracked. They begin to question what was real, what love meant, whether their childhood was ever whole. Even subtle comments, sarcastic remarks, small jabs can do more harm than we realize. It puts them in an impossible position, caught between two people they love equally, asked to carry pain they didn't create. Let me ask you something gently. Have you ever found yourself saying something about your spouse to your children just to release some steam? Maybe you didn't mean it to hurt. Maybe it just slipped out. But later, did you sense the energy shift? The air go quiet? The phone calls grow shorter? It's not about blame. It's about awareness. Your spouse, no matter how imperfect, perfect, is also your child's other parent. Their image of you is tied to their image of them. And when you speak with kindness or even restraint, you're not protecting your spouse. You're protecting your child's sense of security, their emotional balance, their peace. Dr. Eleanor Mason, a family systems therapist, puts it this way. When parents criticize one another to their children, even in adulthood, it fractures the emotional map that child has been using for decades. Suddenly, they're lost in a story they thought they understood. It doesn't just affect how they see their parents, it affects how they trust, how they love, and how they navigate conflict in their own relationships. So what can you do instead? Find other spaces to process what hurts. A trusted friend, a counselor, even a journal. Speak the truth you carry, but choose your audience with care. And if you do need to speak to your children about the past, do it with grace. Instead of saying, your father never cared about me, you might say, your father and I didn't always agree, but he loved you in the best way he knew how. Instead of, I should have left years ago, say, we made it through a lot together, and I've learned what strength and patience really mean. These small choices protect something sacred, because if love was the first lesson your children ever learned from you, then respect should be the last. Before we move on, can I ask you something? When you think about your partner, past or present, what's one thing they did that made your life better, even just a little? Maybe it's something you haven't said out loud in a while. Or maybe not at all. If something comes to mind, say it. To them, if you can. To yourself, if not. Or leave it in the comments if you feel comfortable. I promise, it matters more than you know. Now let's talk about something many of us do without even realizing it. We compare one child to another, one path to another, and in doing so, we may be breaking something we spent a lifetime trying to build. If you're still here, I think this next part will speak to you too. Let's talk about something delicate, and I say this with love because I know where it comes from. The longing to see your child settled, the hope to hold a grandchild in your arms, to see family dinners, wedding photos, and a future that feels complete. It's a beautiful wish, a natural one, But when we turn that wish into pressure, even unintentionally, it can push our children away in quiet, painful ways. You might say it softly, almost like a joke. So, any plans to give me a grandbaby yet? Or maybe it sounds more worried. You're not getting any younger, sweetheart. It's time to think seriously about settling down. You mean it with care, with warmth. But what your child hears deep down is this: who you are right now isn't enough. Let me ask you gently, have you ever wished your child's life looked more like yours did? Or maybe like the life you had hoped for them, and when it didn't? Did you feel that quiet ache, that urge to fix, to guide, to push? You're not alone. You're a parent. And wanting the best for your child is a kind of love that never ages. But the truth is, their best might not look like yours. Some children choose to marry late. Some choose never to marry at all. Some want children. Others don't. Some are still figuring it all out. And that's okay. Dr. Mariah Blake, a therapist who works with adult families, says this: the need to be accepted by your parents, exactly as you are, doesn't disappear at 21. It lingers. And when parents push too hard for a certain path, adult children often feel unseen, or worse, conditionally loved. Let that sit for a moment. Because I know, you don't mean to make your child feel unloved. You're proud of them. You want them to have everything good in life. So what if, instead of asking when they'll give you a family, you ask them, are you happy with where you are right now? What if you gave them the space to become exactly who they are? Even if that looks completely different from what you imagined, I promise you, your love will go deeper, your relationship will grow stronger, and when they do choose to share a new chapter, marriage, a child, a passion project, they'll want to share it with you because you didn't rush them. You stood beside them. Let me tell you something from my heart. Not every child is meant for the traditional family, but every child needs to feel their parents' unconditional support. You are not just their past, you are their anchor, and your faith in them can be the wind in their sails. So I'll ask you now, softly and sincerely, when was the last time you told your child, I trust your path, even if it's different from mine? If that feels hard to say out loud, maybe today's the day to begin. And if this message touched something in you, if you saw yourself or someone you love, please take a moment to share it. Leave a comment. Tell me your thoughts. I'd love to know what this stirred in you. And if you think someone else needs to hear this, maybe share it with them too. And of course, if you're finding these stories meaningful, consider subscribing to the channel so we can keep growing, healing, and walking this journey together. Now, let's move gently into the next truth. Sometimes the deepest wounds between siblings don't come from childhood arguments. They come from the quiet comparisons parents never meant to make. Let's take a softer look at what comes next. Let's talk about something that almost every parent has done at some point, often without meaning to, often from a place of pride. Comparison. We look at our children, different in how they walk, talk, live, love, and in the quiet corners of our heart, we start to measure. One has a stable job. The other is still figuring it out. One seems responsible. The other, maybe not so much. And sometimes, in a moment of conversation, we let it slip. At least your sister always calls me back. Your brother's doing so well with his business. Maybe you should take a few notes. Or even something softer like, I wish you were more like him when it comes to planning. We don't mean it to hurt. We think we're encouraging or simply stating the truth. But the truth is, comparison cuts deeper than we realize, especially when it comes from someone a child wants to make proud more than anyone else. Let me ask you gently, have you ever seen one of your children go quiet after a comment like that? Pull away just a little, not out of rebellion, but out of quiet hurt? I know you love them all, but loving your children equally doesn't mean treating them the same, because they're not the same. Each of them is a story, a different journey, a unique map of strengths, flaws, fears, and dreams. When we compare, we erase the richness of that story. We send a message, often unintended, that says being you isn't quite enough. But here's the beautiful truth. You don't need to compare your children. You get to celebrate each of them exactly as they are. Instead of saying, why can't you be more like your sister? You could say, I admire your creativity. I see how differently your mind works. Instead of praising one in front of the other, praise both in their own light. This one's my dreamer. That one's my rock. And I need both. Dr. Samuel Bryce, a psychologist who works with adult siblings, says this: sibling closeness in adulthood often depends less on how they were treated as kids and more on how they were talked about in front of each other. Parents who avoid comparison build bridges, not walls. That's powerful. Because at the end of the day, your children may live in different cities, live different lives. But if they can look back and feel that their home was a place where they were loved for who they were, not who they weren't, that will carry them for a lifetime. So here's something you can try. Think of one thing you admire about each of your children, not based on success, but based on character. Who they are when no one's watching. Then tell them. Let them hear it from you. And if it's been a while since you've said something kind to the child who's been struggling the most, maybe today is a good day to start again. Leave a comment and tell me, what's something about your son or daughter that makes you proud in your heart, not just on paper? Your words might just remind someone else of what matters most too. And if this message stirred something in you, if it helped you reflect or brought up a memory, consider giving it a like or sharing it with someone you love. You're not alone on this path. We're walking it together. And now, let's move forward. Because sometimes the pain we carry about aging can quietly slip into our conversations, turning every call into a cloud of complaints. Let's talk about that next. There's something tender, something vulnerable about growing older. The body doesn't move quite the same. The aches linger longer. Appointments pile up. Pills line the cabinet shelves like tiny sentinels of change. And sometimes, when the day grows quiet, it's natural to want to reach out, to tell your child, my knees have been acting up again. To text, the doctor's ordered more scans. To sigh into the phone, I barely slept last night from the pain. You're not trying to be dramatic. You just want them to know, to care, to maybe worry, just enough to stay close. Because deep down, you're thinking, if something happens to me, they should be prepared. That instinct comes from love, from a lifetime of being the protector, the planner, the one who held everything together. But here's what we don't always see. When every call, every message, every visit becomes centered on pain, on problems, on fear, our children begin to carry a kind of invisible weight. They start to feel anxious, helpless, like no matter what they do, it's not enough to make things better. And slowly, they pull back, not because they don't love you, but because they're overwhelmed. Let me ask you something. Have you ever noticed your child go quiet when you start listing your symptoms? Have you ever sensed them changing the subject gently or ending the call a little earlier than usual? It's not because they're cold, it's because they're scared of losing you, scared of not being able to help, scared that every update brings them one step closer to goodbye. Dr. Helen Moore, a geriatric care specialist, says this: adult children often experience chronic anxiety when their parent overshares medical details. They begin to see every message as a possible crisis, and that emotional state becomes exhausting. So what can we do? It doesn't mean you have to keep everything inside, not at all. But it does mean choosing wisely what you share and how you share it. Talk to them when it truly matters, when decisions need to be made, when support is needed. But for the small discomforts, the daily aches, the just another appointment kind of news, pause for a moment. Ask yourself, do they need to know this, or do I just need to feel heard? And if it's the second, maybe write it down, tell a friend, whisper it to God on a morning walk. Sometimes simply releasing it into the world is enough. You don't always need someone to fix it. You just need to be reminded you're not alone, because you're not. And here's something beautiful to hold on to. Every time you choose to share strength instead of fear, to offer joy instead of dread, you give your children the gift of peace. And in return, they give you something just as precious. They stay present. They keep calling. They come home. So here's my gentle encouragement. Share what matters, but let go of what doesn't. Hold on to grace more than pain, and speak from a place of calm, not panic. You're still the heartbeat of your family, and your calm voice still sets the tone for everyone around you. If this spoke to you, if you've ever felt that tug between I want them to know and I don't want to worry them, leave a comment and tell me what's helped you find that balance. And if you're finding comfort in these stories, I'd be grateful if you'd share this video with someone you love, or subscribe so we can keep walking this road together. Now, let's keep going. Because sometimes, even without meaning to, we make our children feel like they're never enough by constantly comparing them to each other. Let's ease into that in just a moment. Not everything that hurt us in the past needs to be passed down to the future. Sometimes, in trying to explain our pain, we end up repeating it. Have you ever caught yourself saying something like, I had to raise myself. Your grandfather never really cared. Or, your grandma was never warm. I don't even know what a real mother's love feels like. Or even quieter lines like, I didn't have half the opportunities you've had. You're not trying to blame. You're trying to help your child understand why you are the way you are, why some things were harder for you, why certain wounds never quite healed. But here's the hard part. When we speak too often of what our parents didn't give us, we're not just telling our story. We're shaping how our children will tell theirs, and we might be teaching them, without meaning to, that it's okay to carry resentment, to hold on to disappointment, to build identity through blame. Dr. Kelvin Rhodes, a psychologist who studies generational dynamics, puts it simply. When children hear their parents speak with bitterness about their parents, it disrupts the emotional chain of compassion. Forgiveness becomes foreign, and anger starts to feel inherited. Let that settle for a moment, because if there's one thing we don't want to pass on, it's the very pain we work so hard to survive. This doesn't mean your story doesn't matter. It does. Every scar has a name. Every silence once had a sound, but there's a difference between sharing pain and anchoring others in it. So maybe the next time you feel the urge to say, "My father never supported me," you might say instead, "I had to find my own way, and that taught me how strong I could be." Or instead of, "My mother never said she was proud of me," you could say, "That's why I make sure to tell you how proud I am of who you're becoming." You're still sharing the truth, but you're offering it as a bridge, not a burden. Because the truth is, we can't change where we come from, but we can change what we pass forward. And sometimes the most powerful legacy isn't built on success or strength, but on forgiveness. Let me ask you something tender. If you were sitting across from your parent right now, whether they're still here or long gone, what's one thing you wish they had said to you? And now, what's stopping you from saying that exact thing to your own child? You have more power than you think. Not to erase the past, but to give it a softer ending. If this part of the story touched something in you, I'd love to hear what it stirred. You're welcome to share it in the comments. Or maybe send this to someone who might be carrying old wounds in silence. And if you haven't already, you're invited to subscribe so we can keep reflecting, growing, and healing together. Now let's shift. Because sometimes, even when we don't say much at all, just being too financially dependent can strain the very bond we're trying to protect. Now let's walk gently into a part of the heart we often keep hidden. There's a quiet belief many of us carry. It's not written down anywhere, but it lingers in the background of how we think, how we love, how we give. I raised you. I sacrificed for you. One day, you'll take care of me. It sounds fair. It sounds like the natural circle of life, and sometimes it is. But here's where that belief gets heavy, when it becomes expectation, because what begins as love can slowly turn into obligation. And that, whether spoken or not, can quietly change the way your child sees you and the way they show up for you. Let me ask you something, gently. Have you ever hesitated to spend your own money because you thought, well, the kids can help if I really need it? Or found yourself depending on their support without really asking how it affects them? You're not alone. It's more common than you think, especially after retirement, when income becomes fixed or when unexpected costs arise, health, home, or just daily life. But here's the hard truth. Even when they love you deeply, financial dependence can feel like emotional pressure to your children, especially if they're trying to raise their own families, manage their own mortgages, navigate their own stress. Dr. Renee Ellis, a financial wellness counselor, puts it this way. When adult children become long-term financial providers for their parents, it shifts the emotional balance. What began as love becomes silent stress, and eventually, distance. That's not what you want. That's not what they want either. What you do want, what every parent hopes for, is to be close, respected, free to ask for help, yes, but never to feel like you depend on it to survive. And here's the good news. That's possible. It starts with something simple but powerful, financial self-preparation, not just for emergencies, but for peace of mind, creating a small safety net, making a plan, even if modest, reviewing what you have, what you'll need, and where support might come from. It's not weakness. It's one of the most loving things you can do, because when you take care of your own needs, you give your children the gift of freedom. Freedom to love without guilt. Freedom to visit you without fear of another request. Freedom to help you when it matters most, because they want to, not because they have to. And if you do need help, because sometimes life throws things at us, we ask, openly, respectfully, not from a place of entitlement, but from trust. That difference makes all the difference. Let me ask you, quietly and sincerely, if you had a little extra saved today, not a fortune, just enough, what would that make you feel? Peace, pride, independence? That feeling, that's what your children want for you, more than anything. So if this message touched something in you, take a moment to reflect. Maybe leave a comment. Share what you've learned about letting go of silent expectations. And if you know someone who's struggling with this too, gently share this video with them. And if you're still here with me, if these stories help you breathe a little easier each week, you're always welcome to subscribe to the channel so we can keep walking this road together, one honest truth at a time. Because the love you've given your children was never about money, and what they give back to you in time should never feel like repayment. Now let's keep going, because the next truth may be one of the hardest for any parent, the choice between honesty and protection, between sharing every health scare and letting your child just enjoy time with you. Let's keep going. The next truth matters just as much. We love them so much. That's where it starts, and that love, the kind that's watched them grow, stumble, rise again, it can quietly become fear. Fear they'll make a mistake, fear they'll choose wrong, fear they'll get hurt in ways we can't protect them from. So we try to help. We offer advice, even when it's not asked for. We suggest, we remind, we gently steer, and sometimes not so gently. You sure that job is stable? Are you really going to move in with them before marriage? You spend too much time working. When will you think about starting a family? It doesn't come from control. It comes from care. But to your child, especially as an adult, it can feel like something else. It can feel like mistrust, like conditional love, like, you don't believe I know how to live my own life. Let me ask you, have you ever seen your child get quieter when you offer advice they didn't ask for? Or notice them visiting less, calling less, opening up less? That's not rebellion, that's distance. And it often grows in the space between love and control. Dr. Alicia Frank, a family dynamics therapist, says, parents often mistake involvement for connection, but too much involvement, especially unsolicited, can erode a child's sense of autonomy. And autonomy is the foundation of adult self-worth. So how do we love without hovering? How do we guide without gripping? The answer lies in trust. Not blind trust, but chosen trust. The kind that says, I may not always agree with your choices, but I trust your right to make them. When your child comes to you for advice, be present. Listen fully. Speak from experience, not fear. And when they don't ask, resist the urge to fix, and instead support in quiet ways. A text that says, thinking of you. I know you're figuring things out, and I'm proud of your strength. A conversation that begins with, how can I support you? Instead of, you should. Because here's what's true. The more freedom your child feels in your presence, the more likely they are to come back. Again and again, not out of guilt, but out of love. Real connection grows in safe space, not tight grip. So, if you've ever found yourself worrying that your child is drifting away, pause and ask, have I given them the room to be fully themselves? Or just the version of them I feel most comfortable with? That question alone can change everything. And if this part of the story touched something in you, maybe made you reflect on a recent conversation, or wish you could take a comment back, know this: it's never too late to shift, to soften, to say, I trust you, even when I don't fully understand you. Leave a comment if you've ever felt torn between protecting your child and letting go. Or if someone gave you the freedom to find your way, tell us how that changed your life. It just might help someone else. And if these stories are helping you see things in a new light, feel free to like, share, or subscribe, not for numbers, but for connection, so that more people just like you can walk this path with a little more clarity and a lot more grace. Now let's keep going, because sometimes we don't even realize the way our words affect our children, especially when we speak too much of loss, limitation, or the heaviness of aging. What comes next is something we all feel, but rarely name. Getting older brings changes we didn't ask for. A body that once moved with ease now complains quietly, then loudly. The mirror starts to reflect not just age, but time itself. And sometimes we say it out loud. I'm not as strong as I used to be. My memory isn't what it was. Everything hurts a little more these days. We say it because it's true, because we want our children to understand, to know that we're tired, that we need help sometimes, that we're not who we once were. But when those words come too often, when every conversation becomes a list of what's slipping away, something else begins to happen. Our children don't just hear the words, they feel the weight. And slowly, they start to see aging not as a natural chapter of life, but as something to fear. Dr. Leslie Grant, a specialist in aging psychology, says this: When older adults constantly speak of aging as decline, their children begin to internalize that fear. They associate getting older with loss, not growth, and it creates a quiet emotional distance between generations. Let me ask you gently, have you ever noticed your child growing quiet when you mention how tired, how weak, how slow you've become? Have you ever felt that they don't stay on the phone quite as long? Perhaps because it's hard to hear their hero talk only of weariness. We all want to be understood, but sometimes what we think is vulnerability becomes repetition, and what we hope will bring us closer actually drives a wedge. But here's the truth. You don't have to pretend everything's fine. You just have to remember that you're more than your aches and limitations. You're still here, still capable of joy, still able to move, to smile, to try, still filled with stories, strength, and moments that matter. So maybe next time, instead of saying, I'm just getting old, you say, I'm learning to stretch a little slower these days, but I'm still stretching. Instead of everything hurts, you say, I walked 3 blocks today. I stopped twice, but I made it. It's not about denying the truth. It's about choosing which truth you want to focus on. Because aging isn't the end of something. It's a transition into something softer, slower, and often more beautiful. The world needs to see what it looks like to age with light in your eyes. And your children, more than anyone, need to see that too. Because when they see you finding joy at 70, they'll stop fearing 40. When they hear you speak of peace instead of pain, they'll start believing that getting older isn't something to dread, but something to grow into. Let me ask you something from the heart. What's one thing that still brings you joy today, no matter how small? A plant you water, a morning stretch, a favorite song. Share it in the comments if you like. I'd love to celebrate it with you. And if these stories have helped you see yourself or your relationships a little differently, I'd be so grateful if you'd share this with someone you love. Or subscribe so we can keep growing together. Because the truth is this, getting older doesn't have to mean fading away. It can mean slowing down and finally learning to live deeply. And you're not a burden. You're a blessing still unfolding. And so, we've walked through 9 quiet truths, 9 things that we as parents often say out of love, but that sometimes, without realizing, create distance instead of closeness. We've talked about the weight of loneliness, the pain of comparisons, the ache of aging, and the silence that grows when we speak too often of things that hurt. But we've also discovered something else, that the deepest love doesn't always need to be loud, that a soft voice, a gentle word, and a heart that trusts can speak more than 1,000 instructions. When you stop blaming your past, you free your children from repeating it. When you choose joy over burden, they learn to embrace their future with hope. And when you give them space to live their own lives, they find more reasons to come back into yours, freely, fully, and forever. So if there's one thing I hope you carry with you after this video, it's this. You don't have to be perfect. You just have to be present. Not with advice, not with pressure, but with love that says, I see you, I trust you, I'll always be here. Because when children feel loved without conditions, they grow roots that never break. Thank you for being here with me today, for listening not just with your ears, but with your heart. And if this video has brought you peace, clarity, or even just a quiet moment of reflection, I invite you to leave a comment. Tell me which part stayed with you the most, or share this video with a friend, a sibling, or someone walking the same road. And if you'd like to keep journeying with us week by week, just tap that subscribe button, like this video, hit the little bell, and become part of our community here at Golden Wise Elders. Because here, we honor the beauty of growing older, with grace, with truth, and always with love. Remember, when you speak, may your words light the way. And when you choose silence, may it be the kind that comforts, not distances. Because when your child feels loved, truly loved, they will always find their way back to you. I'm grateful you're here. Until next time, stay wise, stay kind, and never stop growing.